There is a high demand for mobile apps due to increased use of smartphones and mobile devices in our daily lives. Mobile apps have become an essential tool for businesses and individuals to engage with their customers, communicate, and access information on the go. So, resulting in that, there is a demand for mobile developers too. So, here in this session, we will understand what kind of questions will be asked in the Flutter interview. So, without wasting much of time, let us go and explore the agenda. So, first in our list is why Flutter is in demand. After which, we will go and start with the beginner level Flutter interview questions. And after that, we will see an intermediate level Flutter interview questions. So, once we have done with the intermediate level, then we will move on to advanced level Flutter interview questions. Then we have scenario based Flutter interview questions also. And finally, we will look into the tips how to crack an Flutter interview. But before we go ahead, just make sure you subscribe to our Edureka's YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to stay updated with all the latest Edureka videos. And also, if you are interested in Flutter certification courses, then you can check out the link that is given in the description box. Now, moving ahead in this session, as said, we have a lot of mobile applications starting with entertainment apps to informational apps. And we have an equal population who uses Android and iOS. To create apps in multiple platforms might take a lot of time and effort. Here comes Flutter into the picture. Flutter allows developers to create cross-platform applications with a single code base. This means that the developers can write the code once and deploy it on both iOS and Android platforms, saving time and efforts. And this is the reason why Flutter and Flutter developers are in demand. Now, if you take a look at the stats that compare Flutter and other app development frameworks, namely React Native and Ionic. As you can see here, the Flutter has the major part in this graph. And you need to understand that it is never late to learn Flutter. So, with that, let us go ahead and see beginners Flutter interview questions. Starting with, we have the first question, that is, what is Flutter? Flutter is a tool that developers use to make mobile apps that can work both on Android and iOS devices without having to write a separate code base for each platform. So this can save time and effort for developers and allow them to create apps that look and feel great on both platforms. So as I said in the previous slide, so it will save time and effort by creating a same code base for both Android and iOS. So this you can tell as a major point for the Flutter. And also Flutter uses a programming language called Dart. So which is very easy to learn and use for those who are familiar with the other languages also. So Flutter also offers a rich set of pre-built widgets and tools, making it easier for the developers to create a beautiful and functional apps. So let us see a sample answer. Flutter is a free and open source UI toolkit for building high quality, native compiled applications for mobile, web, and desktop from a single code base. So this is a sample answer that you can answer in the interview. So moving ahead, let us see our next question. How is Flutter different from other mobile apps development frameworks? Flutter is different from other mobile app development frameworks in that it uses a single code base for building applications for multiple platforms. As I said in the previous question, it includes iOS and Android. So Flutter also uses a reactive programming model and a unique widget-based architecture that allows a faster rendering and customizable UI elements. So we also have a lot of features that Flutter provides, where one of the most important feature is our fast development. Hence, Flutter offers a reload feature that allows developers to see a change in their code immediately without starting the application, which means it processes like a speed of wind, which speeds up the development process. And the next feature that Flutter offers is its expressive and flexible UI. Flutter uses a widget-based architecture, right? So that allows the building custom UI elements easily and quickly. It also offers a large library of pre-built widgets that can be customized to create unique designs. Then we have another feature called native performances. Flutter uses a Dart programming language, which is compiled into a native machine code. This makes the app built with Flutter highly performant with smooth animations and quick reload time. Then also we have another feature that is our cross-platform development. With Flutter, developers can build applications from multiple platforms like Android, iOS, web, and desktop from a single code base. And at last, we have an open source feature. Flutter is an open source framework with a vast community that provides support, documentation, and a wide range of plugins and packages to choose from. So while answering the interviewer, you can tell these kind of features for differentiating the Flutter from other frameworks. Moving ahead with the third question, what programming language is used in Flutter? As I said before, Flutter uses the Dart programming language. Dart is an object-oriented, class-based programming language that was developed by Google. Flutter uses Dart to build the user interfaces, components, and business logics of the mobile apps. Dart is a modern language with features such as static typing, async and await, and ahead of time compilations, which makes it a good fit for building high performance mobile apps with the Flutter. So let us move on to the fourth question. What is widget in Flutter? Basically, widgets can be classified into two types, that is, the stateless and stateful widget. Stateless widgets are immutable and cannot change once they are created, whereas stateful widgets are mutable and can change their appearances based on the change in their internal state. As I said before, Flutter provides a rich set of pre-built widgets, right? Such as the text, image, button, list view, and many more. You can also create your own custom widgets by combining the existing widget or by creating new ones from the scratch. Widgets in Flutter are designed to be composable, which means that you can nest widgets inside the other widgets to create complex user interfaces. So, this makes it easy to build complex, responsive, and beautiful user interfaces in Flutter. So, I'll give you a sample answer for this question. In Flutter, a widget is a basic building block for building user interfaces. Widgets are also used to create visual components such as buttons, text fields, and images, and also can be composed together to create complex UI elements. So, you can answer this way to the interviewer also. Now, we have the next question based on the widgets. What is the difference between the stateful and stateless widget in Flutter? As I said in the question number 4, that is what is widgets in Flutter, we have stateless and stateful widget. The main difference between the stateful and stateless widget in Flutter is that the stateful widget can change their internal state, while stateless widgets cannot change. Stateless widgets are immutable, meaning that they cannot be changed once they are created. They are designed to represent a part of user interfaces that does not depend on any changing data or user interactions. For example, a text widget that displays a static text, which could be a stateless widget, right? For example, you will have a app name. For example, let's take Instagram. So we will be having just the Instagram name over there. So if you touch on the Instagram, you will don't see any changes over there, right? So it is just a static widget over there, meaning the stateless widget. So that can be an example for your stateless widget. On the other hand, the stateful widgets are designed to represent a part of the user interfaces So that can change dynamically based on the user interactions or the other changing data. Stateful widgets have the mutable state, which means that they can change their appearances or the behavior over time. For example, there is a checkbox widget that can represent a boolean value. Boolean value is nothing but the true or false. For example, if you click on that, you will have only the two options, the 0 or 1. It's like that, okay? So these boolean value would be a stateful widget, as its appearances and the values can change based on the user interactions. To manage the state of the stateful widget, the Flutter provides a stateful widget and the state classes. The stateful widget classes represents the widget itself, while the state class represents the mutable state associated with the widget. The state object is created when the stateful widget is inserted into the widget tree, and it persists until the widget is removed from the tree. So if I want to give you a sample answer for this question, it would be like, in Flutter, stateless widgets are immutable and their properties cannot be changed, while stateful widgets have mutable state that can change over time. Stateful widgets are used when the need to manage the state that changes dynamically, such as the user input or the network request. So this is a kind of a sample answer, and also you can make your own sentence based on the understanding that you have on widgets. So now let us move on to the next question. What is the pubspec.yml file in Flutter? Okay. The pubspec.yml file is configuration file that is used in Flutter to define the metadata, dependencies, and assets for the Flutter project. So this file is an important file that keeps all the information about your Flutter project. As you can see, it is written in YAML. It means the YAML aren't markup language. So it is written in this YAML format. And it also contains the essential informations about the project, such as the name of the project, version, author, description, and other configuration settings also. So in this pubspec.yml file, you can define the dependencies required for your Flutter project. So dependencies are the third-party packages that your project requires to function correctly. So these packages are hosted on the Dart package manager called the pub. You can specify the package name and the version range required by your project in the dependency section of the pubspec.yml file. So how do you answer this in a simple form? So this pubspec.yml file in Flutter is used to specify the dependencies and the configuration for a Flutter project. It contains the information such as the project name, version, and packages that the project depends on. So you can also answer like this, and also you can make up your own answer. Now let us move ahead and see our seventh question. That is the difference between a hot restart and a hot reload in Flutter. So you need to understand we have hot reload and hot restart feature in Flutter project. As our hot restart completely restarts the app and rebuilds its state from scratch, while a hot reload injects the updated code into the running app without starting the app or losing its current state. Hot reload is a faster way to make interactive changes to the app's UI during the development. So if you look at the table here, you will have a clear understanding of the difference between the hot reload and hot restart. So once you look at the definition over here, for the hot reload, it reloads the code changes and it updates the UI. So if you look at the hot restart, it restarts the entire app and reloads the code and the UI, where it completely restarts and reloads the code from the scratch. So it will take a lot of time to give you some results when you want to see the changes immediately. So if you look at the execution time over here, as I said previously, so hot reload is faster than the restart, Whereas the hot reload restarts the entire app. So it might take a lot of time. So it is slower than the reload feature. Then let us look at the state preservations. So whereas the hot reload preserves the app state, whereas the hot restart where it resets the app state. Then we have the performance impact, where the minimal impact on the app performances is shown in the hot reload. So where if you look at the hot reload feature, there is a high impact on the app performances. The use cases for hot reload is ideal for the UI changes and quick code iterations, whereas the hot restart is used when the code changes requires a full app restart. Whereas if you want to restart an entire code and you want to see the changes so that you can use the hot restart. Then if you look at the limitations, in hot reload, it cannot apply all code changes without restarting. So it reloads only the changes where you have made. It will be showing you the output based on the changes that you have made there. Whereas if you take a look at the restart, it requires more time to complete than the reload because it restarts the entire app, right? So it takes a lot of time to restart. So there is a lot of limitations and the advantages at the same time for the both features. So we don't have any particular answer for which is better or not. So both has a limitations and the advantages. So with that, let us move on and see our 8th question. What is the purpose of the build method in Flutter? In Flutter, the build method is required method that is called by the framework to build the user interface of a widget. So the purpose of the build method is to describe how a widget should look and behave based on its current configuration and state. The build method returns a widget tree, which is a hierarchy of the widgets that describes the user interfaces of the widget. So the widget tree is then used by the framework to lay out and paint the widget on the screen. Now this build method is called whenever the state of the widget changes or when the widget needs to rebuild from any other reasons. For example, if the widget's configuration changes such as its size or the color, the build method will be called to update the widget's appearances. So it is important to note that the build method should be a pure function, meaning it should not have any side effects and should only depend on the widget's configuration and state. So this is because the build method can be called multiple times during the lifetime of the widget, and any side effects could lead to unintended behavior. So I hope you understood the explanation. Now let us see a sample answer. So here the build method in Flutter is responsible for creating and updating the UI of a widget. This build method is called when the widget is first created and again whenever the widget state changes. Now, if you look at the 9th question, what is the purpose of init state method in Flutter? In Flutter, the init state method is a lifecycle method that is called when the stateful widget is inserted into the widget's tree for the first time. The purpose of the init state method is to initialize the state of a widget, which can include the setting default values, initializing variables, and subscribing to streams. Now let us see some of the common use cases of the init state. The first one is initializing the variables. You can initialize any instant variable of the widget inside the init state method. For example, if you have a counter variable that you want to start at 0 and you would initialize this as the counter is equals to 0. By using init state, you can initialize the counter is equals to 0 methods also. The next one is the setting up the listeners. So if your widget needs to listen to any streams or change notifications, You can set up these listeners inside the initState method. For example, if you want to listen to stream that updates the UI every time new data is received. So you would set up this listener like stream subscription, which is equals to mystream.listen, where you will give the data as a parameter over here. Then you will have a set state method that is called. So in such a way, you can also set the listeners there. Then we have a fetching data. If your widget needs to fetch data from any API or a database. So here you can do this inside the initState method. For example, you can use the HTTP package for fetching data from any API and update the widget state when the data is received. So you need to understand, it is very important to note that any heavy computation or long running operation should not be performed inside the initState method, as it can slow down the app's performance and cause it a freeze zone. Instead, you need to perform these kind of operations asynchronously. For example, using the future.display method of the async or await keywords. So if I want to make it simpler and I want to give you a sample answer, then the initState method in Flutter is called when a stateful widget was created, and it is used to initialize the widget state. So this method is typically used to fetch data from an API or to set up animations or other long-running tasks. So I hope you understood with that question. Now let's move on to the next question. That is, what is the purpose of setState method in Flutter? In Flutter, the setState method is used to update the state of a widget and trigger a rebuild of widget's user interface. So the purpose of setState method is to tell Flutter that the state of widget has changed and that the widget needs to be rebuilt with the updated state. So here let us see how setState works. The first thing, when you call the setState, the Flutter schedules the rebuild of the widget. The next thing is, during the rebuild, the Flutter calls the build method of the widget, which creates a new widget tree based on the updated state. And the next thing is, the Flutter compares the new widget tree with the old widget tree, and it applies only the necessary changes to the UI. So this is also simply called the reload method. So here I have a code. So if you look at this code, so in this example, the counter is a variable that holds the current value of the counter. So whenever the user taps the floating action button over here, the increment counter is called, which increments the counter and the calls setState method to update the UI. Here, the build method is then called again with the updated counter value, and the UI is rebuilt to show the new values. So if we want to make it simpler to answer, the setState method in Flutter is used to update the state of the stateful widget, which in turn triggers a rebuild of the widget UI. So this method should be called whenever the state of the widget is changed. Then we have the 11th question. What is a future in Flutter? A future is a way of representing a value or the error that may not be available yet, but this will be at some point in the future. A future represents a computation that may take some time to complete, such as loading the data from the database or making an API call. So now let us see how it works. So it is when called a function that returns a future, it immediately returns a future object also. So the future object represents the result of the computation, so which may not be available yet. You can also use the then method of the future to register a callback that will be called when the computation completes and then results in the available. You can also use the catch error method to register a callback that will be called if the computation fails with an error. So if you look at this code here we have this get item from the database. So this is a function that returns a future list item. The then method is used to register a callback that will be called when the list of item when the database query completes successfully. The catch error method is used to register a callback that will be called if the database query fails with an error. You need to note that the async and await keywords are used to write the asynchronous code in a more synchronous style. The await keyword is used to pause the execution of the function until the future completes, and the async keyword is used to make the function as asynchronous method. So simply in Flutter, a future is an object that represents a computation that has not yet completed. So it is also typically used for the asynchronous tasks such as the network request or the file input-output operations. Then we have the next question. What is stream in Flutter? A stream is a way of representing a sequence of asynchronous events. A stream provides a way for your code to receive and respond to the event as they occur, rather than waiting for a computation to complete. So, how does it work? A stream represents a sequence of events such as the mouse is clicked, or the timer ticks, or the data received over a network connections. So here you can use the listen method of the stream to register a callback that will be called each time an event is received. The callback will receive the event as a parameter and can perform some actions in the response to the event. So if you take a look at this example over here the counter controller is a stream controller here. So that is used to send the event to the stream. So when the user clicks on the floating action button, that is your handle button clicked, is called. So which sends a 1 to the stream using the sync.add method. So here you can see, right? Here the stream builder widget is used to build the UI based on the event received from the stream. The stream parameter is set to the counter controller.stream, which is the stream that we want to receive the events from. Here the initial data parameter is set to 0, which is the initial value of the counter. The builder function is called each time a new event is received from a stream and is passed a snapshot object that contains the latest value of the stream. The builder function returns a text widget that displays the current value of the counter. So let us make this more simpler. In Flutter, a stream is a sequence of asynchronous events that can be listened to and processed in the real time. Streams are commonly used for the processing data that is continuously updated, such as the data from a sensor or a database. Then we have the next question, that is, what is the purpose of the Material App widget in Flutter? In Flutter, the Material App widget is used to define the basic material design, that is visual elements and the behavior of your app. So it's typically the root widget of your app and it is used to set the app's title, theme, homepage and roots. So let us see some of the key features and benefits of using the Material App widget. We have the app bar and title. Here you can specify an app bar and title using the app bar widget. So which is built into the Material App. So this provides a consistent visual event across your app and helps user identify your app. So that is like your heading of the app. So then we have the navigations. The Material app provides a default navigation system that allows user to move between the screen in your app. So here you can define your app's routes using the route property of the Material app. Then we have the theming. The Material app allows you to define a theme for your app using the theme data class. This allows you to custom the visual style of your app, such as the color, typography, and shapes. Then we have the localization. The Material app provides the built-in support for localizing your app's text and UI elements. Then we have the accessibility. Here, using Material app includes the built-in accessibility feature such as the support for the screen readers and the ability to custom the text size. So if I want to make it simpler, or if I want to give you a sample answer, then the Material app widget in Flutter is convenience widget that provides common app level features such as the navigations, theme, and localizations. It is typically used as a root widget of the Flutter app. So as a beginner, it is very important to know what is Material app and what features does it has. So once we have seen with the Material app, now we will move ahead and see the question from the scaffold. Now let us see what is the purpose of the scaffold widget in Flutter. So this scaffold widget is a basic visual layout structure for your app screen or the page. So it can provide a container for the app bar or the navigation drawer, floating action buttons and button navigations bar, and other common UI components that are typically used in your mobile apps. So if you look at the features, same like the Material app, here we have the app bar. Here the scaffold widgets includes a built-in app bar that can display a title, icon, and actions such as the search or the settings. Here the app bar can also customized to include the additional elements such as the tabs, a back button, or a menu. Then we have the body content. Here, the scaffold widget provides a container for the main content of your screen, so which can be a single widget or a widget tree. This content can be scrollable or non-scrollable or even outlaid on the top of other elements such as the floating action buttons. Then we have the floating action button. Here, the scaffold widget can display a floating action button, that is your FAB. So that performs a primary actions that happens on the screen, such as the adding a new item or opening a search dialog. Here, this floating action button can be customized with the icon, text, or other elements even. So after that, we have the bottom navigation bar in the scaffold. Here, this widget can also display a bottom navigation bar that allows the user to switch between the different screens or the tabs within your app. So here the bottom navigation bar can be customized with the icons, text, or both. Then we have the drawer. Here the scaffold widget includes a built-in navigation drawer that can slide in from the left side of the screen. So this drawer contains the links or the button to other screens or the functions within your app. So if I want to give you a sample answer, then the scaffold widget in Flutter is a basic framework for the building app UI. So it provides a default app bar, bottom navigation, and floating action button, as well as the ability to easily add and customize the additional UI elements, so such as the drawer and the snack bar. Then we will move on to the last question in the beginner section. What is layout widget in Flutter? So in Flutter, a layout widget is a widget that arranges its child widgets in a specific way. Following a certain layout algorithm, a layout widget is used to create the visual structure of your app by determining the size, position, and order of the widget that make up your UI. So there are several built-in layout widgets available in Flutter, such as the column, row, stack, expanded, then you have the flexible, list view, grid view, and many more. So each of these layout widgets has a different purpose and behavior, and it can be used to achieve the different type of layouts. And you need to understand that the layout widgets are the building blocks of your app UI, and understanding how to use them effectively is a key to create a well designed and responsive user interfaces in Flutter. So let me give you a sample answer. In Flutter, a layout widget is a widget that is used to position and size other widgets with a parent widget. Examples of layout widget includes the row, column, and stack. This widget provides different way to arrange child widgets and control their placements and sizing within the parent widget. Now that we have done with the beginner level Flutter interview questions, now let us move ahead and see the intermediate Flutter interview questions. So the first question in the intermediate level is, what is Flutter widget tree and how does it work? Here, the Flutter widget tree is a fundamental concept that the Flutter represents the user interfaces of a Flutter app. So in Flutter, everything is widget, right? So from a small visual elements like button or text label to entire app itself. Here, the widget tree is a hierarchical structure where each widget can have one or more child widgets. The parent widget defines that the layout and the behavior of its child widget. So here, when a widget is added to the tree, the Flutter creates the corresponding element objects that manage the widget state, and it handles the rendering of the widget on the screen. So whenever the state of the widget changes, such as the user interactions or change in data, so here the Flutter updates the widget tree to reflect those changes. This process is called reconciliation. Here, this Flutter efficiently updates only the part of the widget tree that have changed, which results in the smooth and the performant user interfaces. And the widget tree is also important for managing the lifecycle of a Flutter app. For example, when a new screen is displayed, a new widget tree is created from that particular screen, and the old tree is discarded. Here, understanding how the widget tree works is essential for developing a high quality Flutter apps. So if I want to make it simpler for answering in the interview, the widget tree is a foundational concept in Flutter. So that is our main answer that you need to tell. So adding on that, it represents the hierarchy of the widget that makes up your app user interfaces. And each widget has a parent widget, except for the root widget, which is the top level widget of your app. So when a widget needs to update or rebuild, Flutter transfers the widget tree to determine which widgets needs to update and then updates it accordingly. So I hope you understood what is widget tree. So let's move and see the next question. The difference between list view and grid view in Flutter. Grid view and list view are two of the most commonly used widgets in the Flutter for displaying a list of data. The main difference between the list and the grid view is the way they lay out their child widgets. So if you take out the main difference of the list and the grid view is where the list view is used to display a list of items in a single vertical column. So it is supported both horizontal and the vertical scrolling. Here the children of the list view are arranged vertically, and each child takes up the full width of the list view. And you need to understand that the list view is ideal for displaying a long list of items, so that do not require complex layouts. Now, on the other hand, if you take a look at the grid view, it is used to display a collection of items in two-dimensional grid. So it supports both horizontal and vertical scrolling. The children of the grid are arranged in rows and columns, and each child can take up a specified amount of space in the grid. And the grid view is ideal for displaying a collection of items that requires a more complex layout, such as the image with the captions. So let us take a look at some of the other differences of the list and the grid view. Whereas you take a list view can display a list of items of varying heights, whereas the grid view requires that all the items have the same height and width. And list view is more efficient than grid view. So when displaying a long list of items, because it only renders the items that are currently visible on the screen. So that is why the list view is more efficient than the grid view. And grid view supports multiple types of scrolling, including the scrollable columns and rows. And also it is used to create a staggered grid where items are arranged in a grid but can have varying heights or widths. So in general, if I want to conclude, list view is used for displaying a simple list of data, while grid view is used for displaying more complex layouts of grid data. List view is a widget that displays a scrollable list of widgets, while grid view is a widget that displays a scrollable grid of widgets. So the main difference between these two are the way that they arrange their child widgets. So the list view arranges their child widget vertically in a single column, whereas grid view arranges its child widgets in a grid either horizontally or vertically. So let us move on to the next question. With that, let us see what is the stream transformer in Flutter. So basically, the stream transformer is a class in Flutter that allows you to transform a stream of data from one form to another form. So it takes an input stream, applies a transformation function to each event in the stream, and it produces an output stream of transformed events. So let us move on to the next question. That is, how do you handle user input in Flutter? So this is simple. So there are several ways to handle user input in Flutter. So it depends on the type of input and the widget that you are using in the Flutter project. For example, you can use the onPressed property of a raised button widget to handle the button pressed. So now the raise button has changed to elevated button, or the onChange property of a text field widget to handle the change to the text field. So similarly, you will have a lot of user input that you can handle with the other properties. So just that you need to go and explore a lot of properties or lot of projects so that you will get a clear understanding of how you need to use a property for a particular method or a class. So I hope you understood. Let's move on to the next question. What is a provider in Flutter and how do you use it? So provider is a state management library in Flutter. So that allows you to share data between the widgets efficiently and in a way that is easy to maintain. So here this works by providing a simple source of truth for your app state. So which can be accessed by any widget in your app. So to use the provider, you typically define a change notifier. So this class that represents your app's state, and then wrap your app's widget in the change notifier provider widget to make the state available to the other widgets. So this is how the provider works in the Flutter. So let us move on to the next question. What is a Flutter plugin and how do you create one? Flutter plugins are the packages that provides a way to access the platform-specific functionalities, such as accessing the device's camera or sending the push notifications. So, the Flutter plugins are typically written in the language specific to the target platform, such as, for example, the Java or Kotlin for the Android or Swift or the Object-C for the iOS. And it communicates with the Flutter app using a platform channel. So, to create a Flutter plugin, you have a few steps. Create a new Flutter plugin project using the Flutter create template plugin command. So after this, you need to implement the plugin functionality in the target platform language. For example, I told you no Java and Kotlin or the Swift or the Object-C. And then you need to create a platform channel that allows the Flutter app to communicate with the plugin code. Moving ahead, you need to implement the plugin functionalities in the Flutter app using the platform channel. After that, you need to publish the plugin to the package manager such as the pub.dev for other developers to use it. So this is how you will create a Flutter plugin. So I hope you understood. Let us move on to the next question here. How do you implement animations in Flutter? Flutter provides a powerful framework that allows you to create a complex animations in your app. So you can use these animation frameworks to animate any property of a widget such as its position, size, opacity or color. So there are general steps to implement the animation in Flutter, like creating an animation controller. Here, an animation controller is used to drive the animations by specifying the duration, like start time and the value range of the animations. So you can create an animation controller by calling just an animation controller into the parameters, and you can pass the duration and you can sync the argument over there. And then you need to create an animation. Here, an animation is a value that changes over time, right? So, usually linearly or using a curve. So, you can create an animation by calling the tween constructor and passing it to the start and the ending value of the animations. Then, you can pass the tween object to the controller driver, this method to create the animation object. Then after that, you need to wrap the widget in an animation widget. So this is a special widget that automatically rebuilds itself whenever the animation value is changed. So you can wrap the widget that you want to animate in an animated widget and pass it in the animation object. Then after that, you need to animate the widget property also. So here you can use the value of the animation object to animate any property of the widget. For example, you can use the transform.translate. So this widget is to animate the position of the widget, or you can use the animated opacity widget to animate the opacity of the widget. So it is as simple as that. So you can use whatever animation you want to use in your Flutter application as your wish. So with that, let us move on to the next question. What is the purpose of the navigator widget in the Flutter? The navigator widget is used to manage the navigation stack in a Flutter application. So it allows you to push a new routes onto the navigator stack that pops the route of the stack, and it controls the transitions between the screens. Here, the navigator widget also provides a method for passing data between the screens and for returning the data from a screen to its parent screen. So this is the use of the navigator. So in simple words, the navigator is just a widget that is managed to navigate the stack in the Flutter application. It is just to move, or it is just to tell the where you need to go after you click a button. So I hope you understood that. So let us move on to the next question. What is the difference between a package and a plugin in Flutter? So in Flutter, the package is collection of Dart code, so that can be shared and reused across the multiple Flutter projects. So as you all know, Flutter is written in the Dart language. So if a package in the Flutter is also written in the Dart code. A plugin, on the other hand, is a package that provides the access to the platform-specific functionalities, such as the camera or the location service, as I said in the previous question. So these can be used in a cross-platform way for using the platform channels, while packages can be purely Dart-based, and plugins typically requires native code development for Android, and it can also used in the iOS in the additional to the Dart code. So with that, we have completed the intermediate level Flutter interview questions. Now let us move on to the advanced Flutter interview questions. So where we can at least have an idea of how a advanced level question will be asked and you can prepare according to it. So here I will be giving you only a brief answer so that you can understand the type of question will be asked in the advanced level interview questions. So let us move on to the first question in the advanced level. What is Flutter engine and how does it work? The Flutter engine is a low-level graphics rendering and layout engine that is responsible for the rendering the UI of your Flutter project. So in simple words, these are the engine in a low-level graphics rendering, and it also has a layout engine that is responsible for the rendering your UI for the Flutter applications. And it is also used as a portable graphic engine called your 𝐂𝐝 to draw the graphs, which allows the Flutter to run on the multiple platforms such as the Android, iOS and web. So the engine also manages the animation and the layout of your user interface elements. So this is what is your Flutter engine is. So if you look at the second question in the advanced level, what is the purpose of the Flutter inspector and how do you use it? So briefly, the Flutter inspector is a tool that allows the developers to inspect the bugs and the UI of your Flutter application. And it provides the information about the widget hierarchy, properties and constraints, and also it allows the developer to modify the widget tree in real time. To use the Flutter inspector, developers can launch it from within the Flutter IDE or by running the Flutter inspect command in the terminal also. So I hope you understood. So that let's move on to the next question. How do you optimize the performance of a Flutter application? To optimize the performance of the Flutter application, developers can use several techniques such as minimizing the number of widgets or using the constant constructor for widgets that do not change. And you can use the Flutter dev tools to analyze the performance issues. And also using the asynchronous programming to avoid the blocking the UI thread. Additionally, developers can also use the Flutter's widget tree to effectively manage the state of the application. So if you look at the fourth question in advanced level, what is Flutter's rendering pipeline and how does it work? Flutter's rendering pipeline is responsible for updating the UI of a Flutter application. So it works by first building a widget tree based on the current state of the application. Then the engine uses the widget tree to generate a render object tree, so which is a low level representation of the UI elements. Finally, the engine draws the UI by transversing the rendered object tree and it generates the necessary graphic comments. Then we have a question like what are some best practices for managing the state in a large Flutter application? So some of the best practices to managing the state in a large Flutter application including using the stateful widget only when necessary because it always re-renders and it draws a new screen over in the Flutter application. So it always reruns whenever the stateful widget is called. So that is why you need to use whenever it is necessary and you need to separate the UI from the state management. Also using the block pattern to manage the state and using the reactive programming techniques to efficiently update the UI. So these are some of the best practices to manage the state in the large Flutter applications. Then we have the next question. What is the purpose of the Flutter driver and how do you use it for the automated testing? The Flutter driver is a tool that allows the developers to write automated tests for Flutter applications. So it provides a set of APIs that developers can use to stimulate the user interactions such as tapping on buttons or entering text or scrolling. To use the Flutter driver, developers can write the test scripts in Dart and it can run them using the Flutter test runner. So let us see the next question over here. What are some techniques for implementing the responsive designs in Flutter? So some of the techniques to implement the responsive design in Flutter, including using the media query to get informations about the device's screen size, using the layout builder widget to create the layouts that adapts the screen size. So and then using the flex and expanded widget to create the flexible layouts, and using the aspect ratio widget to maintain the aspect ratio of your user interface's elements. So these are the techniques that you need to implement whenever you need to have a responsive designs in the Flutter applications. So with that, let us move on to the next question. So what is Flutter's architecture and how does it compare to other app development architectures? Flutter follows the reactive programming paradigm and uses a unidirectional data flows architecture called the Flutter architecture, which is inspired by the model view update pattern. So this architecture is composed of three main parts, that is the model and the view and the update function. So if you take a look at the model, then this is a data layer of the application that represents the state of the app. And also it includes all the data and logic that are required to maintain the state of the application. Then if you take a look at the view, then this is the presentation layer of the application that displays the user interfaces. It also includes all the widgets that are required to display the user interface and receives input for the user. And then we have the update function. So this is a control layer of the application that manages the state of the application. And also it includes all the logic that updates the model and it rebuilds the view based on the changes in the model. So whenever you compare to the other development architecture, the Flutter architecture has some of the similarities and differences. So when you take a look at the model view controller, so this is a traditional architecture that separates the application into three parts, that is the model, the view and the controller. And the controller is responsible for the managing the communication between the model and the view. So in comparing, the Flutter and the architecture combines the controller and the model into a single update function. So then we have the model view presenter. This is another traditional architecture that separates the application into three parts, same like the model, view and the presenter. Here the presenter is responsible for updating the view and handle the user input. In the comparison of the Flutter architecture, the presenter and the model input is a single update function. Then finally we have the model view model, that is your MVVM. So this is a modern architecture that separates the application into three parts, the model, the view and the view model. The view model is responsible for updating the view and the handling user input. So in comparing, the architecture combines the view model and the model into a single update function. In overall, if I want to tell, the Flutter architecture is a modern and efficient architecture that simplifies the development of complex and reactive user interfaces. So it also offers a straightforward and predictable data flow and is well suited for building the scalable and maintainable applications. So let us move on to the ninth question. What is the purpose of the Flutter plugin registry and how do you use it? So in brief, the Flutter plugin registry is a repository of plugin developed by the community that extends the functionality of Flutter. The purpose of registry is to provide a centralized location where developers can find and download the plugins that can be used in their Flutter project. The plugins can provide access to native devices features such as the camera, GPS, and storage, as well as the third-party services such as the Google Maps and the Firebases. To use a plugin from the registry, you first need to add it to your Flutter project by specifying it as a dependency in your project's pubspec.yaml file. So once you have added the plugin, you can import it into the code and start using its functionality. So this is how you will use the plugin registry. So with that, let us move on to the last question in the advanced section. So how do you implement the platform specific functionalities in the Flutter application? Flutter provides a mechanism for accessing the platform specific functionality through the platform channels. Platform channel allow your Flutter app to communicate with native code running on the device's platform, such as the Java code running on the Android device or Swift code running on the iOS devices. To implement the platform specific functionalities in a Flutter app, you first need to define a platform channel that describes the method signature for the native code you want to call. Then you need to implement the corresponding native code on each platform and register the channel with the Flutter engine. Finally, you can use the platform channel in your Flutter code to call the native code and access the platform specific functionality. For example, if you want to access the device camera in a Flutter application, so here you could define a platform channel that provides a method for starting the camera. And also you would then implement the corresponding Java or Swift code to start the camera on each platform and then register the channel with the Flutter engine. In your Flutter code, then you could call the platform channel method to start the camera and receive the camera output. So with that, we have come to an end of the advanced level Flutter interview questions. Then we have the 5 set of scenario based interview questions. So let us see one by one. So let us take a scenario where you need to build a Flutter app that needs to display a list of items. So how would you implement this feature in Flutter? So how would you answer this? So simply tell to display a list of items in a Flutter app, we can use the list view widget. Right? Do you remember that initially I have mentioned the list view and grid view? So in that you can take some of the points over there and you can include here for the list view. Then here we have the list view. The list view is a scrollable list of a widget that are arranged linearly, right? So this can be used to display a large number of items without taking up too much screen space. So we can also use the grid view. So this widget is to display an item in a grid pattern. So it also allows us to create a grid of items with a fixed number of columns or with a variable number of columns depending on the device sizes. So this is how you will take the answer from the list and the grid view and you can make up your own answer. So it is just a matter that you need to understand the concept properly. So I hope you understood this scenario based question. So let us move to another one where you need to build a Flutter app that needs to handle the user input from the text field. So how would you handle this in the Flutter? So to handle the user input from a text field in Flutter, you can use the text edit controller class. So we can create an instance of text edit controller and pass it to the text field widget using the controller property. Here the controller allows us to get the text entered by the user and to clear the text field. So let us take this question. So you are building a Flutter app that needs to display a pop-up dialog box. So how would you implement this feature in the Flutter? So simply tell that to display a pop-up dialog box in Flutter, we can use the show dialog method. So this method displays a model dialog box that overlays the current screen. So we can pass a widget to the show dialog method to specify the content of the dialog box. We can also add buttons to the dialog box using the flat button or raised button widget. So now instead of raised button widget, you can also use the elevated button widget. So that would also work with it fine. So then we have another question. So here you are building a Flutter app that needs to navigate to a new screen when the user taps on a button. So how would you handle this in Flutter? To navigate to a new screen when the user taps on a button in Flutter, Then we can use the navigator class. Here we can create a new route using the material page route class that passes it to the navigator's push method. Here the material page route class takes a widget as an argument that represents that the new screen to be displayed. So when the user taps on the button, we can call the navigator's push method and pass the new route to it. So this will display the new screen and it allows the user to navigate back to the previous screen using the back button. So this is how you will navigate to a new screen. So if you take a look at the final question in our interview session, is consider you are building a Flutter app that needs to fetch data from an API. So how would you handle this in Flutter? To fetch the data from an API in Flutter, we can use the HTTP package. So that is the basic package. So if you are starting as a new, so you can start with the HTTP for fetching an API data. So we can create a new instances of HTTP client and you can use its get or post method to fetch data from the API. Then we can pass the responses using the Dart converter package and then display the data into your app. So to handle the asynchronous data, we can use the future builder widget to display a loading indicator while the data is being fetched, and then display the data once it is available. So we can also handle the error and exceptions by using the try-catch block around the API calls. So we have done with the interview questions. So let us see some of the tips to crack your Flutter interview. So whenever you are attending any interview or any technical interview specifically, you need to understand the basic concepts. So the first thing here is to familiarize yourself with the basics. So make sure you have a good understanding of the basic concept of Flutter, including the widget, state management, and asynchronous programming, layouts, navigators, app bar, etc. So first you need to practice the code and then you need to understand those codes, what does it does, and you need to understand the properties, functionalities of the basics first. Then you need to practice the code. So one of the best way to prepare for the Flutter interview is to practice code. So create simple apps. Start experiment with the different features to gain hands-on experiences, or you can fetch some of the widgets or other features from the other app and you can use it for your own app. So by doing these practices in the Flutter applications, then you can have a wide range of understanding of what widget or what layout should you use after what. So after that, you need to review a sample interview questions that can help you to get a sense of what to expect during the interview. Like you have come to this session, right? So you can have a brief understanding of what kind of questions will be asked in the interview. And you can find the sample question online or by speaking with other who have gone through the process or who has experience in the Flutter domain. So you will have an idea of how the interview process goes and you can have a good knowledge of how to answer those interviews. Then you can showcase your portfolio. So if you have a portfolio of Flutter applications, so be prepared to showcase them during the interview. This will give the interviewer a chance to see the skills and experience in action. So they will understand how skilled you are and how your presentation skills are there. So this can help the interviewer to pick you as the first priority. Then you have to research about the company. So it doesn't matter what company you are going. First, you need to understand about the company and you need to understand what kind of products they do have and what kind of services they do provide. So you need to learn about their products, services, and mission. So this will help you to understand how skill and experience aligned with their needs, so that you can prepare more about their company and you can go and give the interview so that you can get selected among the other competitors. So while showcasing your skills, you need to be very confident so that it shows the interviewer that you are very passionate about the Flutter and you are excited to work with them and their team. So it is very important to show them that you are an energetic person and you have many skills within you. Then finally, you need to ask questions. So be prepared to ask questions during the interview. So this can show the interviewer that you are very engaged and interested in the position. So ask about the company culture and the team that you are working with and the projects that you will be working on. So with this, you will have a good understanding about your team as well as the project that you're going to work, so that the interviewer will also have a good understanding about your skills and your engagement into the project. So by following these interview questions and the tips I have given, you can develop the skills and knowledge needed to become a successful Flutter developer and join your dream company. So remember, becoming a Flutter developer takes time, dedication, and hard work, and also it requires a combination of technical and soft skills. So I hope you will be a better Flutter developer in the future. We Edureka wish you all the very best for your upcoming interviews. So if you are interested in getting an Flutter online courses certification, then you can check out the link that is given in the description box. So if you like watching videos like this, and we have lot more videos coming on this topic, so don't miss out the latest and trending topics that are coming in this channel. So hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to never miss any updates from Edureka. So let's see you in the next video. Until then, happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!